In the next set of lessons, we're going to be talking about control flow statements. Generally, code is executed line by line, and if you want to reference a variable in order for that variable to be referenced, you first need to declare that variable above the code. As an example, let's say that I have I is equal to 6, and then we have integer I. So as we can see, on line 2, we are declaring that integer, and then on line 1, we're assigning it. So if we try to run this, we will see that we get an error, and the error, illegal forward reference I. So in order for this to work, it has to be the integer or the variable has to be declared before we can do any assignment or at the same point in time that we do the assignment. As we can see, this ran correctly. So control statements, there's several different types of control statements. There's an if-else, switch, and loops, which provide the ability to execute or repeat blocks of code. And we'll be talking about if-else statements in this lesson. In other lessons, we'll be going over a switch and loops and talking about blocks of code as well. So if-else statements are conditional, where you will execute blocks of code based on a true condition with if-else, and else being the key words. You can have just an if statement. So as an example, I'll change this to, we'll do integer x is equal to 2. And then we'll do if x greater than or equal to 2, then x is equal to 3. And debug. So as we can see here, we were able to, so we declared integer x, which is equal to 2. The if statement is checking this condition based on the operators and checking to see whether or not it's going to be true or false. Since this is true, x is greater than or equal to 2, it's going to assign x to be 3, and then we can debug x as well. We can also just, and we can see that it's in there, but in if block. So the other thing that we can do is, let's say that we have a string, if string, we'll call it if statement, will be the string. So we have another if statement for if string equals equals, and then the same. We'll just take this right here and have it be the same for it to be true. And then we want to execute the block of code. So that's going to be, we'll just say that we updated the string, so updated string. And then we'll also debug both of these. And then I don't want x, I want there. So when we run this, we're going to be declaring the variables and instantiating their values, and then checking if statement 1, debugging, and then running and checking if statement 2, running and debugging. So we should be able to see all the changes that occurred. So we were in the first if block, debugged to 3, second if block, and then the string was updated to updated string. So we can have it where an if statement doesn't have anything else associated to it. It could just be the if, and it will, if this condition is true, it will update that block of code. What we can also do is we can use if else. So what if else is going to do is it's going to first run and check this if statement. If this if statement is false, then it's going to run the second if statement. I'm just going to modify this, bring both of these debugs up here. We'll take this whole condition. So the else if has to have a condition to it as well. There's a different one that we will talk about where you don't have to have a condition. That's just going to be the else. So if I run this, it runs through this first condition is true. So it's going to run through where you can see the in if block. So it's in the first if block, which we see right here. And then we also see when we debug x down here, the integer changed because we're assigning it right here for x is equal to 3. And then we're checking this if string. So this string was not updated. We can see that's the original value for if statement instead of it being the updated string value. And the reason being is because now beforehand, those two if statements, they didn't have anything to do with each other. Now when we brought in this second if statement into the else if, we brought both of these statements together, and now this is only going to execute if this is first false. So then if I just say greater than 2, which it won't be, we can see that when we debug, we see that the integer value is 2, and then we have the updated string value. The next thing that we can do is we can also add an else statement. And what this else statement means is that if this line, the condition for the first if, and then the second if, the else if it doesn't meet any of those conditions, then it's going to run the else statement. So then we can just debug that to the else. And then if I run, let's see, greater than 2 is, we'll do is not equal. Line 11. Oh. And we can see for the first debug, which it went and passed this if block, and then this if block, and then finally got into the else statement. So we can see that the last one was, or the first one is the else statement that it went through, and then it got to the other one, or the other debugs, which is as we expected. So for if statements, it's going to start out with an if, and then any other conditional logic that you want to put in, you can use else ifs, and you could have as many as you want. And then the last one would be an else statement if you want something to execute if it doesn't meet any of the other conditional criteria up here. So that's the main thing for if-else statements. One thing that I want to show and demonstrate is that there is some shorthand for the if-else statements. One way would be to have everything on one single line of code. You can do that by, okay, so I have integer x is equal to 4, and then I'd say if x equals 4, and then I can, instead of having this block of code up here,
if I only want to have a debug or one assignment or a return or something of that nature, where it's not going to take up a whole lot, it's just going to take up this single line, I don't need to put the whole block in, and the block being the curly braces. So I can just put in executed the condition. And then if I run this, I can see that the debug did work. Now what I could also do is I can put in an else statement as well. So if I wanted to do else system.debug get to the else say to the else. Right. So then if I do not equals to make it false, it runs correctly, and then I can see that I got to the else statement. This isn't very common, however I have seen it every once in a while. So you may come across it. That's where I wanted to just showcase this one and bring it up so you don't get thrown off if you see this. And I'll see you in the next lesson.